Welcome to episode 181 of the CUInsight Experience. I'm Randy Smith, one of the co-founders of CUInsight.com, and this show is all about taking a deep dive with the leaders of the credit union movement that make it so great. This episode is brought to you by Humanidei. Humanidei helps credit unions build inclusive cultures that attract, develop, and retain top talent. Today, I am excited to have a conversation with Jenny Vipperman. Jenny is the president and CEO of ORNL FCU in Tennessee. And with that, let's jump right in. Welcome to the show, Jenny.
Well, thank you for having me.
I've been looking forward to this conversation. Jill was giving me a lot of the time she gives me tips before I record on things I should talk about. I have a few questions that I'm really looking forward to hearing more about. But first, for those who don't know you, how about just a little bit of background? Where did your career start, and how did it lead you to credit unions? Most of us didn't grow up being like, we want to work in credit unions someday when we were kids.
Yeah, absolutely. So back when I was living in Northern Virginia, I moved up there right out of college and worked for Enterprise Rent-A-Car, great company to go into and learn the management basics. So had a great career for about 5 years there. And while I was there, I ended up selling cars. And I worked in the finance office selling cars. And I happened to sell a car to the board chair of my first credit union. He, at the time, he had been there for over 45 years. He ended up being there for 50 years when he retired. And meeting him, I felt like I had never really known what credit unions were, even though I was a member of a credit union and a credit union had given me my first car loan. So I worked with credit unions, but somehow meeting him and understanding why he spent nearly 50 years of his life in a volunteer position working for free, it really inspired me. And so I had reached out to the credit union. Turned out they were looking to start an indirect lending program. So happened to be looking for somebody with just exactly my background. And kind of the rest is history. I've worked at 5 credit unions since then, over 17 years. And it's just my absolute love and passion.
That's beautiful. It's funny how we all come to it. My first car loan was from a credit union too, up in Michigan, and I had no idea really what credit unions were at the time either. So, and now here we are. A twofold question, and this is one of those places that I know Jill was talking to me about something that she was, really excited about that you're doing, is that idea of whether it's working through with CUSOs or fintechs, the collaboration side, and you mentioned the background in lending. What has you most excited that you and your team are working on currently? And also, when you look at the credit union movement or even financial services overall, the speed of transformation has been pretty remarkable over the last few years. What has you excited, from a blimp level for our industry as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I get excited about a lot of things. I am very involved in the fintech movement. I've been on multiple boards. I sit on the board of an AI mortgage company now, and I was part of another AI company. So I'm really excited about the fact that credit unions are kind of writing our own future. That hasn't always been the case. Technology would come and maybe we would be able to be a part of it. But I always thought of it as we were getting kind of the leftovers from the banks. Things were created for a banking structure and we were just kind of making it work for us. So I'm so excited that so many fintechs, so many technology companies are out there creating things just for us that meet our needs, that are created for members in mind, for our types of organizations in mind. And this is the first time that I've seen that in my career. So that's extraordinarily exciting for me. In terms of the movement nationally, I'm seeing a lot of my peers do the same and really invest, whether it's money or time, their expertise, really getting in and becoming betas and making sure that these programs are made for and by and advised by credit unions. Internally, we're doing a lot of those same things. You mentioned our CUSO. We do have a wholly owned CUSO, which is 7 LLC, but beneath that, we have multiple CUSOs, some wholly owned and some co-owned with other credit unions. And it's just a tremendous aspect and quality of the credit union movement. I mentioned I've been doing this for quite a while. And one of the things I love is that we work together. We help each other. We lean in, we give each other advice, and we take advice. We're the beneficiaries of it. So it's really exciting for me that we are continuing to serve that way. And we just rolled out another CUSO. That's our mortgage servicing CUSO, not only to service ourselves, bring in servicing from another sub-servicer, but then we're able to take that out to other credit unions so they can have the member experience we all want without having to use a sub-servicer out there. So that's something I'm really excited about right now.
That's pretty cool. Let me ask you a question. From where I sit often and, running around the country, going to conferences and things like that, and just talking to random people around our industry, a lot of the times I've found that maybe a credit union in one area doesn't necessarily play as nice with the credit union down the street. And then maybe they don't know about an opportunity that's, say, across the country. How are you finding partner credit unions to collaborate with on some of these ideas?
I'll start with my own history and then kind of move into ORNL's history, because I've only been here for 5 months, but my credit union has been working with partner credit unions for years and years and years. And again, I think that's something that's so special about the movement. But I really think it comes from, I started in the DC metro area, and there are so many credit unions there on a very small postage stamp, as well as 2 of the largest credit unions in the world. And so you kind of learn pretty quickly that these organizations are not your competition. You're kind of all competing together against banks and now against fintechs and others. I would say it really is a thought process of, I'm willing to share what I'm doing. And I'm also willing to listen to somebody else and be very open to the fact that there are so many people out there who know so many things that I don't. And when we come together and we talk about it, it really is our superpower over our real competition, who are the banks and technology companies who are
Couldn't agree with you more.
In our market. So I really see that when we go out to networking events and we go to conferences and things like that, it's just being so open to receive and share information. And this is something that the organization I'm with today has been doing so well for so long, and really putting, quite literally, our money where our mouth is and going in together to create these CUSOs. And it makes us stronger. It makes everyone around us stronger.
Another rabbit hole here. You mentioned fairly new to the credit union, the CEO chair there. What, I guess, intrigued you or, lit you up about this opportunity a few months back?
Sure. Well, like I said, I've been in the industry for a while, and my goal has always been to eventually be in a CEO role. I believe in this industry. I believe that what we do is extraordinarily important. I also believe that we can't take anything for granted. Just because we've been around for 90 years doesn't mean that we'll be around as an industry for 90 more. And it requires those of us who love it to be in leadership positions, and whatever that means for us. And so I was very intentional about the roles that I've taken over time, the people I've wanted to work for and the people I've wanted to learn from to prepare me for this role. And so when I found myself ready, where I felt that I was ready, I was really looking for an organization roughly of this size. I've been at all size credit unions. I've been at small credit unions. I've been at a very, very large credit union and everything in between. But I thought that 3 to 4 billion size was just a really nice sized organization. I selfishly wanted to be in the mid-Atlantic near all my family and on the East Coast and in the time zone. So there are so many things that made me look at ORNL, but what made me fall in love is the people here. We have a tremendous management team, board, staff through every level of this organization that love the credit union, that love our community, that truly care so deeply for our members, that I knew that this would be the right fit for me.
Since it is fairly new, you've just went through this process. If there's somebody out there who's listening today and they also have a similar goal, they want to be the CEO, is there anything from how you prepared or even just the process while it's top of mind that those kind of tips or hacks that you could offer to somebody listening today?
Absolutely. Well, I will say this. I had a great job, and I loved my job, and I loved my credit union. I loved my community. And so in order for me to take another role, I felt that it needed to be the right fit. And I think in order to do that, and I've talked to a lot of people who've been through this process, either successfully or they're still working through it now. And I think there's probably a tendency to want to understand what a credit union is looking for and demonstrate how you're that. And I would just say to everybody who's out there, know who you are, know what it is you care about, what you want to accomplish, what really truly matters to you at your core, and make sure that you show potential boards that, because this isn't just any job. This is a role that hopefully you will have for a very, very long time, if not the rest of your career. And it's absolutely imperative that the things that drive you, that you care deeply about, you share that with your board. And there are so many different philosophies that are good, but there are different philosophies that do not align. And so it's critical not to just know what they want and try and show that, but to know who you are, what you want to be, what you're going to be, and show them exactly how you are going to lead their organization. And if it's not the right fit, that is okay. The right fit is out there.
I think we often think of the interview as like the board interviewing you, but it goes both ways, right? Like you don't want to be in a position where it's a bad fit for you, where you're going to be unhappy as well, even if you got the title. So that's great advice. Before I kind of move on a little bit more into the leadership things, you mentioned that just a few minutes ago that you were on the board of a couple different AI companies. Obviously, I feel like last year, all of a sudden, ChatGPT became everything for a little while. That's all anybody was talking about. But for the credit union leader that's out there today, do you have any, I guess, recommendations on if they want to educate themselves, right? Like as leaders, we have to keep up with the technology that's out there. It doesn't mean we have to be experts in it, but we at least have to have enough knowledge, I guess, to be dangerous. Is there anything you would recommend to somebody who like maybe was listening a couple minutes back and they were like, AI, okay, I've heard of it, but how does that or will that affect my credit union?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think AI is here to stay. I think it's really important, and just like anything with technology, I think it's really important for our leaders to educate themselves. We don't need to go out there and we don't need to be programming AI. Nobody needs to get up tomorrow and go take a Python class. I think what really matters is understanding what AI is and what AI isn't, and all the different types, understanding the difference between Gen AI and machine learning and those sorts of things, because these companies are going to come in and present things to you. You need to understand exactly what it is that they're selling you and exactly what it is it's going to do. I think, too, realizing that just like anything else, you need trust, particularly in any type of automation that you're rolling out to your members, because there's a lot of power in that. And when you, at some level, we're not going to understand every single thing that goes into these programs. And so you've got to understand what goes into the companies and what guides them and how they back test it and protect your organization. And I'll give an example. Several years back in 2019, I wasn't looking for AI. I was just looking for a better decisioning engine. We've all been doing this for a very long time. We used the best that we had while it was the best that we had, and then we needed something better. And I came across Zest AI, which was then Zest Finance. And I was looking at all of these different decision engines, and I wanted to make sure that we had something that aligned with our industry and that would create something for us with really good inclusion, fair lending, back testing that could demonstrate in front of the NCUA, in front of the CFPB, in front of anybody who asked what we were doing and how we tested to make sure that it was fair and correct and accurate. And that's how I found our partner. And that's how we worked through this together. And I think that's absolutely critical, that you continue to find the partners that you trust and you continue to understand what it is they're doing for you in order to make sure that you're doing what's right for your organization and for your members.
No, that's great advice. Kind of the flip side of, I feel like everything we're talking about right now is like what's exciting, at least to me as somebody who likes the tech side of things as well. But if you take a look again, industry wide, credit unions as a whole, what are the biggest challenges that you see us, I guess, specifically facing today, 2024?
We've got the normal challenges, right? The economic challenges. We're on this consistent roller coaster and we're always going up and down. And I think that's something that we have been weathering for decades and we will continue to weather. I think the biggest challenge right now is the fact that we've got two things that are amplifying each other every day. And one is increased regulation alongside consolidation. And so we've got the NCUA saying, we don't want you to consolidate. We want there to be actually more credit unions. But at the same time, they're saying, well, we need these increased regulations. We need more laws. We need more oversight. And you can't have both. And I think they're doing it for the right reasons. Of course, we want more credit unions. Of course, we don't want to consolidate. Of course, we want to make sure we have better oversight and that we're treating people fairly and doing the right thing. But those two things cannot continue to coexist and not affect each other. So the increased scrutiny, the increased cost of regulation, the increased cost of technology, the increased demands of our members naturally leads us to a place where, at the best, we have better scale and we can do better through consolidation. At the worst, we've got organizations with all the heart and soul but that just cannot scale to meet all of those burdens. And so that's a challenge for us. I came into this industry when we had 10,000 credit unions, and we have fewer than half of that.
I was just going to say, you mentioned 17 years. This is 16 years of CUInsight, right? So that was it, right? There was over 10,000 credit unions. Now we're under 5. And I even, when you mentioned looking for a certain size of credit union, wanting to be the CEO of, my mind instantly went to, well, that's a nice level because you can scale, right? Like if you're too small, it's tough with limited resources to scale. So I've got a few more things there I'd like to talk about, but I want to make sure to talk a little bit about your leadership journey. You mentioned, working at different credit unions around the industry and being very intentional on the opportunities you were taking to advance your career. Did you have mentors that you leaned on along the way to the CEO chair? And I guess, can you think of, how those folks maybe helped you becoming who you are today?
Yeah, well, I'd say I'm very lucky that I've had a lot of friends throughout my career, people that I could rely on. I have one mentor in particular. His name is John Flynn. He's been in the industry for a very, very long time. He was a CEO many years ago, and he founded Open Lending. He's somebody that I looked up to just tremendously, who I know that he's going to give me great advice because he cares deeply about my career. And so he's somebody that I look up to absolutely, and has always, for over 15 years, truly has been a constant in my career, giving me advice when I need it and telling me the truth, even if it's maybe not the truth that I wanted to hear at the time.
How are you giving back to, now that you've been in this role? Are there ways that you're giving back to, I guess, the next generation? Or even, for that matter, we know the average age of many CEOs. There's quite a bit of turnover happening right now, right? Like, so there's a lot of folks that are coming in, which I think is, I'm not trying to say this to say that we need to push people out, but with new energy that are coming into our space right now, it's kind of cool to watch. And as somebody who's in the role, there's going to be quite a few that follow behind you. How do you see helping bring those people along?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I feel very, very strongly, first and foremost, that we all are, that I am a steward of this industry, and that far before me, we were here, and I want us to exist far after me. And in order to be a good steward, I have to create more CEOs. I think that's really my responsibility and all of our responsibilities. And I take that very, very seriously. I would say a couple things to that. One, there's basic math involved, right? We have a large group of young baby boomers and older Gen Xers that there's simply more of them than the age range. I'm not going to say how old I am, but the age range.
I appreciate you including Gen X. As a Gen Xer, I appreciate you including us in that. Normally, It's just from baby boomer to millennial, right?
You just jump right in.
I was just like, amazing. I'm going to be 50 this year. And don't forget about me. No, so
Exactly. And so there's a younger group, that big millennial group who's very big. It's a very big group of people.
Huge.
Many of whom are not yet, many are CEOs, but many of whom are not yet at that point in their career to become CEOs. So we're at this numbers game where the normal, the average, the more traditional age of someone becoming a CEO, there are simply fewer people that age than the age who is currently retiring and the age who is coming up behind. So we do have to try harder to bring people in and to prepare leaders for the CEO seat. And one of the things that I have learned from being at organizations that are in the hundreds of million asset size to the billions to well over 10 billion asset size is how you manage these institutions are very different. And so it's not so easy to go from a very, very large to a very small or vice versa organization without any experience. So being able to lean in, work at maybe multiple organizations, or at the very least work with multiple organizations so you can understand how you run those institutions differently. I'm very focused on creating a environment in which the people who work for me on my team here are all in a position to, if they all became CEOs, hopefully not tomorrow on the same day.
But not only at the same time, right?
Not all on the same day. But if they all became CEOs and left and I had to replace every role, I would consider it a twofold success, because that means there's more incredible CEOs in our industry. And now I have more friends and contacts in the industry that we can help each other when we have challenges. So I really think that that's the focus we all need to have, not how do we hire somebody who will stay with us by our side forever, but how do we bring people in who have the fire and the drive to lead and give them an incredible experience so they'll want to stay. But if they want to be a CEO and be at the helm of a credit union, they can go and do that tomorrow.
So let me ask you about that. When you're looking at your leadership team, what are you looking for? Like whether you're bringing somebody new in or as, when you walk in kind of the door to a new organization, there's an existing team. Like what characteristics, strengths are you looking for in your not only senior leadership team, but leaders in general? And I guess on the flip side, is there something that just completely turns Jenny off where if somebody says it in an interview, you're like, you won't be here. Like there may be a space for you someplace, but it's not here. Yeah.
Well, I'll answer the first half of that because that's much more positive and easier to answer. So the first half, I would say, I'm looking for somebody I can trust. So are you very competent and are you very honest? I think that's the number one most important thing. I don't care what industry you're in, is somebody who's really, really trustworthy, who will always admit if they've made a mistake, who will always have the care for other people and for the organization and put that in front of themselves, super high integrity. The other side, and this is absolutely positively table stakes for me, is I need people who are willing to speak up, even when they know what they're about to say is not what I want to hear or not what I think. It's maybe different from what everyone else in the room thinks. I want people around me and in this organization and on my team who have an opinion and aren't afraid to share it respectfully at the right time, but who aren't afraid to think differently and to challenge me. I think that is how we succeed. And the lack of that is where we have our biggest failures.
So it's interesting because I think all of us as leaders, we want that, right? Like where we want people to be able to kind of speak truth and be able to express themselves. How do you create the trust with your leaders, your other teammates, that they can come to you and they know that if they disagree with you, that it's not going to negatively affect the word that keeps popping into my head is safety, like where they feel safe doing that, kind of that, I have an open door policy, that type of thing's almost, everybody says it, right? Like, but how do you create that space because to me, it sounds like you want that, right? Like you actually, like that's how you're going to learn and grow too. But how do you create that environment where everybody does feel like that they can express themselves to you and others?
Safety is the absolute right word. I agree with that completely. I would say, and I've done this a couple of times now, but I would say the first is you have to be extremely intentional about it. And you've got to tell people that that's what you want. You've got to open a space for it. So I will go out of my way to ask the question, and I probably don't do it exactly right, but I go out of my way to ask the question, what am I missing here? Tell me something I don't know. Poke a hole in this for me. Help me see it differently. And when someone gives me a different perspective, I thank them for it. And most importantly, I change my mind. I'll change the direction we're going. If there's another idea, even if I really, really like my idea, even if I really, really like the way I want to do it, I will go out of my way to go a different direction if somebody had the courage to have a different perspective. And I will say, that sounds better than what I was thinking. I really like that. And if it's not, if I do disagree, if we do go another direction, I might say, thank you for that. I think I still want to do it this way, but I really appreciate you sharing that. And let's hold on to that one. I think it's consistently going out of your way to recognize the behavior, to be grateful for the behavior, and to act on it to make people feel really, really safe in that.
Okay, so this is, again, this is a complete scratch my own itch type of a question here. And it's because it's something that over my career I've struggled with, but it kind of ties into what you were just saying. When you think about, no matter the size of the organization, we only have so many resources, right? Like it's not an infinite supply. When an idea isn't working well, how do you have any, I guess, tools that you use or what maybe to like kill that idea? Because we generally don't start something we think is going to not be successful, right? But then when it's not, how do you shut it down to, take advantage of another opportunity before you waste a lot of good resources, whether that's time, money, people,
Absolutely. I mean, are you suggesting that I've over time made decisions that didn't actually pan out?
I know I have, and sometimes I've stuck in with them too long too, right? Like, so I'm like, I can make this work.
I think It's so easy to say fail fast. It's so easy to do that. It's to say it. It's so hard to actually do it. It's so hard to say, hey, we've sunk all of this into making this decision. I think it goes two ways. One is really listening in the beginning to other people and putting in the structure that helps. I've seen it happen. I've done it myself. I've held onto an idea way too long when it wasn't good anymore. It was no longer serving. But I think it's decoupling the thing that you're doing from the person who thought of it or the person who's doing the work. So separating those two things out and then talking about what we learned and what we're going to do next, as opposed to, hey, we're shutting all of this down. You failed. And now we're going to do something else. To be able to decouple that and say, this was one great idea. We've gone down the path. These are the things we've learned. Now we're going to try this and see if this works. Again, so much easier said than done. But I think when you're putting the right structures in, when the people making the decisions are not the same one who have put blood, sweat, and tears into making it happen and can look at it objectively, it really, really helps. And then to celebrate those decisions, the courage, the leadership courage to say, this isn't working. We're going to move over to something else. And that happens a lot when you come into a new role, whether you're the CEO or anything else, and you're looking at things with a fresh set of eyes to look at it and say, what served us before does not serve us any longer. So let's look at ways that we can question this or update it for today. And we've done that here. But again, it's decoupling that thing you're doing from the person who did it.
Decoupling. That is sticking in my head. I like that. When you think back over your career, was there an investment that you made? This question comes from another podcast where it was, what's the greatest investment you've ever made in your career? And it was actually to Warren Buffett, and he said Dale Carnegie courses. Is there an investment that you think back on your career that you're like, yeah, that was helpful?
Yeah, I mean, I could say going back to school and getting an MBA, being willing to move for new jobs and doing all of those things. But I'm going to go ahead and say the best investment I've ever made in my career is investing in the careers of other people. Not only is it the right thing to do, it is, but quite frankly, it has benefited me more than anything I've done for myself. Because when you are really spending time developing somebody else, that comes with it. They're improving. They are able to do more. They also are giving something that they didn't have when they first came in. There's a loyalty that's there as well. And when you're leaning in and helping somebody that way, you're learning yourself. And so I have had the pleasure to work with so many incredible people over my career. And the time that I've spent helping them invest in themselves has been truly the best thing I've done in my career.
What do you think makes a good leader or a CEO today, 2024? Just by our time in the industry, we probably came up reading a lot of the same books, right? And some have aged well, some haven't. But in 2024, what do you think makes a good leader?
Well, I'll say two things. One is being willing to hire people who are better than you and listening to them and not having to be the smartest person in the room. Lots of people say it. Very few people actually do it. I think that is so important because we can't know everything. We shouldn't know everything. And having an army of people who know things and can do things that we cannot makes us so strong as a team. So I'd say that's one. The second, the book that I still think reads really well is Radical Candor. It's something that does not come naturally to me. Having those really, really candid conversations and the thought of somebody being mad at me or disliking me because I'm sharing that information with them definitely is not something I'm naturally comfortable with, but the value to it is extraordinary. I think it's so important to we sit there and we think this person's not doing this, or I hate it that they do that, or they're never going to get promoted if they keep doing this thing. And we keep it inside. And it's so very selfish, I think, because we don't want them to be mad with us and we don't want to have to actually come out and say it. But if you just told them and they were able to act on it and they were able to improve their career, it's really, really powerful. So I think radical candor and really, really being thoughtful, caring, not doing it in anger and not doing it because you want something, but doing it because you really care about the other person and want them to be successful. You can learn it, you can read it, and you can practice it, and you can get better at it. That's the great thing about that.
We will link to that book for sure in the show notes. The radical candor that you're talking about, like when you're thinking of team members like, or as a leader, having that, one of the interesting things over time that in conversations that I've had as friends have kind of moved into the CEO role is like the interesting side is even if they've been to board meetings, that relationship and having a good relationship with your board prior to being the CEO, you pretty much had one boss, right? Like you had your direct boss. You become the CEO, you suddenly have 9 bosses, so any advice to the new CEO out there or somebody who, again, hopes to be a CEO someday on how to not only manage, the team, but to work with your board as well?
Absolutely. I think that's a fantastic question. I was very fortunate in my last role that I spent a lot of time with the board and I had individual relationships with every board member. And I think that's uncommon at that level. And so I think that really helped prepare me here. I would say, don't forget that you have 7 or 9 or 11 or 13 bosses, that you really need to communicate with all of them. And no matter what, always lead with transparency. The board is smart. Your board knows how your organization runs. Your board's been there longer than you have. And it's important to be very transparent, to share things with them. But it's so important to listen. Listen to them. It is their job. It is your job to listen to what they have to say and make sure that you have those lines of communication open. You've probably heard every horror story of CEOs going in and just trying to do what they want to do and not listening to a board. It's the biggest mistake you can make. It kind of goes back again, though, to making sure you pick a board that's aligned. Make sure you pick a board that does want transparency, that does want to have that relationship, and make sure that you're speaking with all of them, not just your board chair.
So this is our first conversation, but just from the little bit of time that we've had together, is it fair to say that like your innovation and moving the credit union forward is not only a priority, but something you enjoy? As you're moving forward, like we all move at different speeds. So as far as whether it's when you're working with your board, whether you're working with your team, there may be times where they're like somebody doesn't see the vision or they don't understand why you feel that's so important. What have you learned, I guess, over your career to help bring people along, and knowing that every single person may view change completely differently? Some people, it makes them extremely uncomfortable. For somebody like me, if we're not changing, I get bored. So,
so many different questions. How about I try to dissect the overall question into a few different questions? I'll start with just change in general, because I love change, and I do recognize that most people do not, and certainly not to the level that I do. So some of that is a self-awareness and how much change is really necessary versus how much change I just enjoy. So it's kind of pulling back and saying, where is the impact? Where are we really, really changing people's lives and doing the things that we set out to do? And then I try to bring myself back from that. The second is any organization can handle a lot more change if the communication is excellent. So if there's no communication, small changes feel enormous. And if you have a process in place to identify where these things are going to hit and how they're going to come together, and communicate it up front and prepare people for it, give them the reasons why in the beginning and get them excited about it, your organization can absorb more change. So I think it's managing that whole process as well. And then when it comes to board buy-in for where you're going, I think I've probably said it several times now. I think communication and transparency is key. That means early and often. So if there's something that I think we ought to do and it's a shock, it's a surprise, the board doesn't understand why, then I've missed something. I've done something wrong along the way. And I think making sure I don't forget who I work for. We are a movement that is run by our members, and they have elected our board to represent them. And I think that's important. And I think that sometimes that's forgotten. So to really understand what is meaningful to the board and demonstrating how a plan that we have gets us to where we're going. And then at the end of the day, there are not very many hills that any of us need to be dying on. So unless it's legal, unless we're talking about at the end of the day, the survival of our organization, some things you need to accept that maybe your organization's not ready for it.
Just got a couple of questions before we start to wrap up the show with a little bit of fun. But the one I feel like I didn't want to skip over because I'm trying to be respectful of time here. What do you see a future for, as far as a career in credit unions look like? If we were talking about that next generation that's coming up, maybe they're in college today. If we were looking out 5 or 10 years, what does that career look like in credit unions where as a movement and industry, we can attract the top talent?
Yeah, what a great question. Wow, if I knew the answer to that, we'd be in great shape, right? I can't remember who it is now who said, whatever it is that you think is going to change in the short term, it's going to be less than that. And in the long term, it's going to be more than that. So the concept of what's going to happen in 5 or 10 years, you always get, robots are going to run the world. They're not. It's going to look a lot like it looks today, only there are a few more technologies. I think we can't underestimate how different the entire industry will be in 50 years. It will be dramatically different. And I'm going to answer the question a little different because I don't know what their life's going to look like in 20, 30, 40, 50 years. But I can say this, if you want to prepare for it, if you want to be very successful in this career or anyone, how fast things are going today, what do we know?
Yeah, that's right.
It'll never be this slow again. So be the type of person who remains curious. Be the type of person who continues to learn throughout your career. Be the type of person who's not only comfortable with change, but is very, very good at helping other people become comfortable with change and overcoming their fears. If you can care deeply about people, if you can help shepherd people through uncertainty and change and always be open-minded to what can be and what is possible, you're going to be really successful, whether it's here in the credit union movement or anywhere else.
Before we move on to the rapid fire questions, was there anything that you were hoping I was going to ask today that you wanted to get out there in the world?
Oh, gosh, that I was hoping you were going to ask. I hoped that, well, I don't know if I hoped, but I never get tired of talking about how we need more women, and in particular, more people of color at the top seats in our credit unions. That's something that we don't need regulation and compliance to take care of. That's something that we all need to be focused on. The people who live in our country today, the nationalities of the people who live in our country today are changing. And we have got to find a way as an industry to change and represent the communities in which we serve. We've got to find a way to put more women in CEO roles at large credit unions and people of color, in particular women of color, in these seats at large credit unions. So that starts with boards. That starts with other CEOs. That starts with our networks and making sure that everyone has a voice in this movement, because this movement is truly for everyone.
I couldn't agree with you more. That's that idea of take a look at your leadership team, because that's where the next CEO is probably going to come from. If everybody looks exactly the same, guess what the next CEO is going to look like, right? So I appreciate you putting that out there. That's fantastic. Now, again, just trying to be respectful of time, we're going to have a little bit of fun with the rapid fire questions. It wouldn't be the podcast without them. Questions are rapid. Your answers don't have to be. So anyways,
okay.
first job you ever had, that pre-credit unions, first time you got a paycheck.
The first job I ever had outside of credit unions? I worked at an electrical company, taking electrical pieces, wrapping them up and putting them in boxes and mailing them places. I cut my fingers a lot at that job.
A lot of paper cuts, right? Yep, that's amazing. When was the last time, whether it was personally or professionally, that you were just amazed?
Oh, that I was just amazed. Oh, gosh, what a question. Man, I need to get out there more and get amazed. You know what? I'm going to tell you something. My son, I have a 13-year-old son. His name is Noah. My son is an artist, and not too long ago, a couple of months ago, he pulled up on his phone where he had created an entire video that he drew, authored, did entirely by himself. And I did not realize that he had that skill. And I was truly amazed by that, the way his creative mind.
Jill has a 12-year-old, so same age, and it is it's a cool age. It's surprising.
It is a cool age.
Becoming little humans. So, yeah. Is there anything that you're currently working on? What's taking up that personal growth space?
Oh gosh, you asked earlier about AI and how you can educate yourself on AI. I've been spending a lot of time educating myself on AI on law and the lack of laws around AI and just general ethics around AI. I was always a big fan of Isaac Asimov. I was always a big fan of sci-fi. And so a lot of those ethical questions rest at the bottom of those books I read when I was a kid and a teenager and continue to read today. And so really going back to that and wrestling now that it's real and it's here with the ethical and the legal side of what we're bringing into the industry today.
That is a deep study right there. So I'd love to talk more about that. One of the things I found in myself and others is often, to get to this position, to be in that leadership position, you tend to kind of, maybe, I don't want to say that have that like A-type personality, but you put a lot into your career. You mentioned your son. How do you create that integration of work and life when you're running an organization that size?
Yeah, I'm so glad you said integration and not balance, because I don't know if somebody's balanced it. I don't know. I can say so I mentioned that I started at Enterprise and I worked there for a long time. And what mattered to me is that I looked up and I really didn't see any women. And when women wanted to have children, they left. And then my sister was working at a very, very large, very well-known consulting company. And the women in leadership positions did not have families, and they would say that they chose their career over family. And to me, it was so important as a role model, I think as a role model in this industry, to be able to say that it's not easy and nobody can have it all, but that it's so important for me to be a great wife and a great mom and a great friend and a great sister and phenomenal at my job. And that means I come to work and I'm not here at 5 a.m. and I don't stay until 9 p.m. and I don't work all weekend. I know what matters and I give everything of myself when I'm there. Then I go home and I'm with my family and I want to be with my family. My husband and I have been together for 25 years. We have 2 amazing children and I love my life and I want to spend more time in it. So really giving my all as much as I can and being present and finding time to do the things that I love to do, to read a book, to hang out with my husband, and know that I don't need to be here in my chair 80 or 90 hours a week to be a great CEO.
I appreciate that. This is a new question. So if you haven't thought about it and need to throw it, we can throw it away. But I found it interesting because maybe it's just me personally. But is there anything that you own that you really should throw out? Or maybe something that your husband's like, you should really throw this out. So
probably 90% of my clothes and shoes, I would say. It's so hard to let go of them. I love all of them.
You love them all. What's the greatest album of all time? That one you can listen to from front to back, or you don't turn off if it comes on the radio?
Abbey Road.
Well, there you go. This question comes from NCUA Chairman Harper. You mentioned regulation, but this has nothing to do with that. Who plays you in the movie biopic of your life?
What a good question. I'm going to go with someone. I'm not saying I think that she looks like me, but I would say, how about Jessica Chastain? Because she's also very fair and has red hair, and she's a fantastic actress, and I would love her to play me in a movie.
I love it. That's the first she's been mentioned on that question, so that's cool. Is there something you're currently reading or that book that you just think everybody should read?
I read a lot, and so I will not give all the sci-fi and fantasy books that I read to you, because probably everybody's not going to love that. I do think everyone should read Radical Candor. I think everyone should give that one a try because it really does challenge you.
We will link to that for sure. When you hear the word success, who's the first person that comes to mind and why?
You know what? I mentioned my mentor, John Flynn, and hopefully he doesn't mind me saying this. He really made his own career, and he had a lot of challenges throughout his life. He was not a perfect person. He's the kind of person who owns his mistakes and works on himself to do better and lifts people up and supports other people. He created a company. It was a resounding financial success, but I think of it in terms of how he created something that matters in this industry while also being a tremendous husband and father and friend. He is success to me.
I don't think he will mind that at all. So the last question, do you have any final thoughts you would like to share and ask of our listeners today?
I just say that this industry is so important to so many of us, and it's given all of us, but so many people so much. And I would just say there are companies, there are people, there are things out there that are working to disrupt us. every day and to make us irrelevant. And please do not allow us to rest on our laurels. Challenge the things that you built, that your friends built, that other people built, and try to disrupt us ourselves from the inside to make our industry relevant and to be able to pass it on to that next generation. And don't forget to prepare that next generation and actually promote them into those roles.
Well, that is the perfect way to wrap it up. Thank you again, Jenny, so much for being here today. I look forward to our paths crossing in person. If people want to get a hold of you, if they have more questions, what's your poison? Email, LinkedIn? How can they find you?
You can always find me on LinkedIn, although I'm a little slower there. They're welcome to email me. I'm jvipperman@ornlfcu.com, and I will respond to you.
Well, we will link to absolutely everything we talked about today in the show notes. So thank you again for being here today, Jenny.
Thank you for having me.
A few things before we go. Please make sure to check out our sponsor, Humanidei, in the show notes. Humanidei is a longtime partner of ours, and I will tell you, their sponsorship allows me to have this much fun and have these kind of conversations and do what I do. So I am very grateful for them. So check them out in the show notes. They can help your credit union build an inclusive organization that attracts, develops, and retains top talent. Please also subscribe to the CUInsight Experience on your favorite podcast player. We're on them all, Apple, Spotify, whatever you're poison. And if you're looking for a book mentioned, like the one on today's show, a quick Google of the CUInsight Experience podcast book list, and your next read can be downloaded or on its way from Amazon. Last but certainly not least, I want to thank all of you for listening. Y'all rock, and I appreciate each and every one of you and hope to see you all soon. Be well, friends.